Hello, everybody. Kirsten Fox. I'm here with Ayla Avery. She is the Rocky Mountain Regional Sales Manager for Negociants USA. And we have some wine today, don't we, Ayla?
We do have some wine today.
How about
Thank
we
God we have some wine today.
So maybe while I'll pour the wine, and do you want to talk a little bit about Negociants and tell us a little bit about that company? And I'll pour.
Sure. It is National Drink Wine Day today, too.
Oh,
so
that's right.
It's very important that we're doing this. So our company is called Negociants USA. We are a family-owned company, and we import into the U.S., mostly Australian, a little bit of New Zealand wines. And we're also international, so we have operations set up in the UK, in Asia, in Canada, New Zealand, in Australia. We are a huge distributor, and yeah, all family-owned, great properties, great wines.
Awesome. Well, we're going to learn a lot from Ayla today.
Hopefully.
So here's your wine.
Thank you.
And
that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. I'll give you a shot of the bottle in a second.
Delish.
All right. This is Yalumba Old Bush Vine Grenache. And maybe you could tell us just a little bit about this. So this is amazing.
So we're very lucky in the Barossa Valley to have some very old vine resource. So this wine comes from vines that age anywhere from 30 to about 80 years old. They're bush vines, which means they're not trellis, they're not head trained. They're really gnarly and twisted and kind of ugly if you think about it. The fruit that comes off the vines is very delicate. It's all hand harvested, gentle pressing. And our style of Grenache is not the overblown, really rich kind of Spanish style necessarily. This is more Pinot-esque in body.
It is. It's very light.
Yep, you can even
beautiful.
see with the color. Well, maybe
nice
you can't
orange
see with
behind
the color.
there.
Yeah, but very Pinot-esque in body, very light, very fresh. Seems some older French barrels, and yeah, just beautiful.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be drinking this while we go along today with the conversation.
I'm going to be drinking a lot of it while we go along today.
So let's talk about what we're going to learn today. So let's see if I can get over to this. And as Ayla referenced, it is National, what is it, Drink Wine Day or Wine Drinking Day or something. So there's a picture of one of my friends in Napa having a lovely pour. I think that was at Domaine Chandon.
It does look like that.
Yeah, so Domaine Chandon there. Yep. So here are our takeaways today. We're going to talk a little bit about the past, about the last 15 years or so in the wine industry in Australia. So you'll get a perspective on what's been going on. We'll talk about what has changed. Oh, this is so funny. My third bullet loads before my second bullet.
Oh,
so there we go. What has changed in the varietals planted. And before that will be what is Australia best known for.
Okay.
And then we'll end with any questions that you have about the Australian industry. And that will be what we'll take away today. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a map. Oh, wow. That is so bad. We don't have a lot of bandwidth here at the hotel, so it's pretty clear, pretty unclear. So on the left side of your screen, you're seeing Western Australia. Top, you're seeing Northern Territory. On the right top, you see Queensland. Below Queensland, you see New South Wales. In the middle, at the bottom, if it's pink, you see South Australia. And then, what is this little guy down
Victoria,
there again? Oh, yeah, Victoria.
And then Tasmania.
And Tasmania. Okay, so maybe you could start us with a little bit of history as to what, I'm going to go back to our camera. Tell me a little bit about what's happened about the Australian wine industry in the last 15 years.
It's been an interesting 15 years for sure. We really started seeing the Australia presence pick up in the late 1990s here in the US. And in the early 2000s was really the heyday. We were blessed with very favorable exchange rates and a desire for new and exciting things from consumers. So Australia fit that bill. We were lucky. We had some larger companies and larger wineries really bring forth some really high quality wines at really good prices. And they flooded the market and everyone went crazy. And it went really well for a long time. And then some things kind of happened to kind of stall the momentum. We had an exchange rate that changed drastically. So that meant that it was more expensive now to purchase the wine from Australia. So prices started to go up. We had this phenomenon and this crazy success of so many of these larger wineries. And then a lot of people tried to copy that. And I think a lot of wineries started to sacrifice quality for quantity.
Oh yeah.
And some of this really good, inexpensive wine started to become not as good inexpensive wine. And then there was this other kind of thing where everyone was chasing scores. We were getting these high alcohol, high octane, overripe, over extracted wines that were getting, 97 to 100 point scores and selling out their entire vintage. So of course everybody wanted to do that. So
you referred to it earlier as what did you call it? Parkerization?
I did, but I don't really want to use that word.
No, because Robert Parker is known. He's of the Wine Advocate, and when you see ratings, they're all really it's a guideline, not a rule. And Robert Parker is known to prefer really full-bodied, crazy alcohol, big wines,
massive wines.
And so really that's what people were looking for, was those high scores associated with his taste profile.
Right.
So
but that style of wine is great in some regard, and there's a palate for it every day, but it's not necessarily the everyday wine. It doesn't really show the beautiful finesse and the incredible possibilities and regionality that Australia can show. So it did fall out of favor with a lot of consumers. It did fall out of favor with a lot of sommeliers, and it did start to fall out of favor with press as well. So right around 2000, and then of course we had that whole economy crash and everything else.
Sure.
So then it all kind of came together as this one big perfect storm, and the Australia category just went.
What do you see pulling it out? Because I've heard, the buzz in the magazines and that there's some really amazing things being written now about Australian wines again.
Well, I think that the wineries and the families and the companies that are doing good things now, we're always doing really good things. We're always making really good wine. It's just they kind of got lost in the mix. And when the whole category itself collapsed, everybody collapsed with it. So what we're seeing now is a focus more on regionality, on cooler climate plantings, on that less extracted, less overdone style of wine. We're seeing a focus on wines that you can drink every day with food, without. And the quality, I think, across the board has gone up because it's had to. Even the wineries that were always doing a good job have elevated. And then the ones that were doing an okay job are elevating because they have to.
Sure, to compete on the world market.
Absolutely, and to bring Australia back to the forefront. So.
Well, it's interesting that you say less extracted, because I've never had a Grenache from Australia because it's an unusual.
Cheers.
Yes, it's an unusual varietal, and as we talk about wine from Australia, you can't help but recognize that Shiraz is the grape.
Absolutely.
So that's the big one. And why does it do so well there? What's the
well, in certain areas, Shiraz it can ripen really well. It can do well in cooler climates. It can do really well in warm climates. It's it's a very easy grape, and we're actually quite varied in our climates in Australia. But Shiraz was one of the first grapes that came across in the late 1700s, mid 1800s. And
so here's our map again, and you can talk a little bit as much as you can see of that, as where Shiraz grows versus other regions.
So Shiraz is definitely the one grape that it has the most vine acreage in Australia, and Barossa Valley Shiraz is probably the most famous.
And Barossa Valley is
in South Australia.
Okay.
It's in the center southern state. It's about 45 minutes to an hour north of Adelaide, which is the capital of South Australia. Australia as a continent is roughly the same size as the US, and actually even Europe, if you were to kind of superimpose the maps. Except they have 7 states, we have 50. So Yeah, so the Barossa Valley has actually been nicknamed the Rhone Garden. So the climate and the soils there have very similar compatibility to the Rhone.
Awesome.
We have 600 million-year-old soils in Australia. It's believed to be the oldest continent on the earth, and multiple different soil types all across the board. So
interesting. So is that, so you were talking about Shiraz and where it's really grown, and what are the things, I mean, where is this Grenache grown? Because this is so interesting.
So this is also Barossa Valley
Grenache.
Yeah. So again, around varietal, Shiraz, Grenache, Mourvèdre, and those were, we've got incredible aged vine resources of those 3 varietals.
What about the other areas that I see pointed out here on this map, which we can't read, but I can see the little arrows going on?
So the Barossa is probably best known for Shiraz, and then we've got a cool climate subregion of the Barossa called the Eden Valley, which also produces beautiful cool climate styles of Shiraz, but is very famous for Riesling. If you go over to Western Australia into Margaret River, that region is most known for Cabernet and Chardonnay. And then we've got Coonawarra, which is another Cabernet-rich region, and Victoria, which grows a lot of interesting things. A little bit cooler climate in Victoria in some areas, more altitude. Actually, some beautiful Pinot Noir coming from Victoria.
And Victoria's that little green one at the bottom, right? Okay. And then where was Coonawarra?
Coonawarra is at the very southern tip of South Australia. It actually kind of sits right up against Victoria. It's very close to the coastline. And then there's Tasmania, which is probably the most exciting region of Australia right now. We've got amazing sparkling wine coming from Tasmania. We've got Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs as well.
Awesome. So that is really exciting to hear about what's happening as they are really coming back, as the industry is coming back. And do you have any thoughts? Does anybody have any questions out there? Think of your questions. Remember, we have a little delay in our chat, but if you do have any questions about Australia, Australian wines, go ahead and type them in. Oh, we talked about a winery earlier. It's growing a great.
Yeah. So because we are so varied in climate and soil, and that's probably something really important to mention is that everyone thinks Australia is hot all across the board, but it's not. There are some very cool climate growing regions. Margaret River is cool. The Eden Valley is very cool, and like I said, Eden Valley is a subregion of the Barossa, and the coolest areas of the Eden will ripen 4 to 6 weeks later than the warmest areas of the Barossa. That's a drastic difference when you're talking about grape ripening. And so we've actually got a winery, Jim Barry Winery, which is located in Clare Valley, that has been experimenting with Assyrtiko, which is a Greek variety, a white wine. And I have not tried their wine yet, but
how do you spell it? I can't even.
A-S-Y-R.
Assyrtiko.
K-O. Sorry.
K-O. Yep. Does that look right?
That looks
okay. There's how it's spelled. And Douglas is asking any differentiation between Australia Riesling and Rieslings from other areas. Good question, Douglas. That's really
yeah, absolutely. So there's the 2 main regions for Riesling in Eden Valley. Styles are mostly dry. 90% of the Rieslings that you see from Australia are bone dry. Characteristics are lime. And Germany, you get the Alsace kind of all across the board, but in general, we are more aligned with the Alsatian style than anywhere else.
Awesome. But so that dry, fruity.
Crisp, nice fruit on the palate, but not sweet on the palate. And I think that's the big difference. You can tell there's that fruit and structure there, but it's not sweet. It's full of
high in acid.
Yeah, very high in acid, lower in alcohol, and bone dry.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Clare Valley, which is one of the top regions for Riesling production in Australia, it's a small region. It maybe produces 1.5 to 2% of Australia's total wine production. However, it produces about 20% of Australia's Riesling. So it is kind of it's a home to Riesling.
I love it. So also one of the things that I hear a lot about in regards to the industry itself is the commitment to sustainability, the environment, those kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in a lot of areas of Australia, water's always been an issue.
Oh,
So
sure.
it's almost because of a need necessarily versus a desire to be part of the cool group. And our company, for example, Yalumba Winery, which is the oldest family winery in Australia, established in 1849. We've had an environmental program that's been in place since the late 80s, early 90s. Because it was always the right thing to do, not because it was the cool thing to do. Because our owner feels that to have longevity and to do what's right for the land and the future, that you have to take care of what you've got. Mm-hmm. So we do things like we plant on drought-resistant rootstock. We capture rainwater. We recycle irrigation water where we can, which is complicated, but we've got a little wildlife refuge at the winery. Most of our packaging is recycled or recyclable materials. All of our Yalumba wines are vegan and vegetarian friendly. We practice very minimal intervention in the vineyards and in the winery. Mm-hmm. Minimal use of chemicals, minimal use of sprays and things like that. So
great to hear.
Yeah, so it's a huge part of the culture, and again, it's because it was the right thing to do, not because it was the cool thing to do, which I think really makes the difference.
It's so much about protecting. It's like a company investing in their employees.
Well, we're 5 generations in the Barossa Valley, and so to make 6, 7, 8, 9, you've got to leave something behind.
Right. So. Any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and go back to our. You can drink, and I'm going to go into our PowerPoint quickly here, and we'll talk about what next week's topic is, which is how do you sell Pinot Grigio at your tables? Super exciting because it is one of those wines that everyone asks about, and certainly that also is the same thing as Pinot Gris.
It's my day drinking wine.
It's your day drinking. I'm not sure we should say that. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy your afternoon. And it was nice to drink wine.
Thank you.
On
Cheers.
National Wine Drinking Day.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.